Hello everyone, we're almost at the end with the list videos of 2020. The only ones left after this one are the ones with my top 50 songs and albums of 2020. But before we get into that, we have 25 honorable mentions over here from 2020. This was another year that in my opinion it had so many great albums, and there are also 25 other picks that I wanted to shout out because I feel that these are some pretty good and decent albums that unfortunately didn't manage to end up landing in my list with the greatest albums of the year. So the first album I want to shout out is this brand new work from Arca. Arca's discography over the years has gone into multiple different stylistic directions. Out of all of them though, it's just the self-titled album that really grew on me and I found to be a really fascinating experience. What we have over here is a change of pace, but I would say that this is a really imaginative work. It's certainly unique for the fact that it's the first time that I see such a futuristic and experimental approach on like Latin pop and reggaeton music, which happens with some of the tracks over here, which in my opinion makes for some pretty unique moments. I don't think I've heard something else like this before. Even if some of the ideas did not manage to captivate me, this album was certainly interesting. Next is the debut of Megan Thee Stallion, Good News. In my opinion, this is one of the better trap albums that came out this year. I really like her rapping, her attitude, and I think that some of the beats and the production over here are pretty solid. Overall, the album has its shortcomings, but it's definitely still one of the more enjoyable trap albums I've heard all year. Next, we have this new album from Lebanon Hanover, which in my opinion it starts strong with some of the tracks and having some pretty magnificent teasers towards this thing, but as we go forward the album just kind of takes a weird direction that I don't think that it necessarily works all that greatly. However, I still find that this is one of the more cohesive works that Lebanon Hanover have done over the years, and it's a pretty decent dark wave and cold wave experience. This album came out pretty early in 2020 and it was certainly one of the standouts because this is a really nice direction of like atmospheric drum and bass. It is a really dark album, but not in the sense that it's really that aggressive. Its sinister feel comes from the extremely moody and dark atmospheres, which in my opinion makes for a really exceptional piece of art. Even if there were moments that I didn't really enjoy throughout, it was still a pretty intriguing and unique experience. The Garden is a band that fuses multiple sounds together, and it's one of those bands that I would hope that I would enjoy their works much more than I actually do. But this seems to kinda change with Kiss My Super Bowl Ring, as in my opinion it definitely contains some of the most compelling stuff the Garden have written, and it definitely makes for one of the most bizarre experiences of 2020. Rabbit Junk just keep on going with their usual cyberpunk style sound, and in my opinion in this one in particular it works pretty well in some occasions. It is engaging, it is dynamic, it is catchy, and an overall decent and enjoyable work from them. Sufjan Stevens' direction into electronic music in my opinion works really well, at least in some parts. Even if the mixing in some occasions is kind of all over the place and the album is really big, and I do think that some of the tracks feel kinda like filler, I still highly appreciate what Sufjan Stevens did with this album. Even if I'm not like the hugest fan of his music, I felt that this album was pretty solid. The Loud Age is an album that I ended up not making a review out of it because I discovered it much later. Basically, this is another project of Ancient Methods and it goes into some more old school electronic stuff. It has like 2000s and 90s vibes to it, and in some occasions it's really well done. Like some of the first tracks over here are spectacular, they have such a nice old school feel to them, but as the album goes I feel that some of the tracks feel slightly underwhelming. I still though feel that this is an album worth mentioning. There are some pretty nice elements to it. Love and Ashes by Blood and Sun is a neo-folk project with really rich instrumentation to it, and as far as I did not find some of the ideas over here to be really all that memorable, one thing I can give about this album is that this is possibly one of the best sounding albums I've heard all year. The mixing and the whole balance of this rich instrumentation sounds spectacular. The sound on this thing is amazing. Every single piece of instrumentation feels like it has a purpose to it, and I like this balance of all of the sounds coming together, making this a majestic musical experience. Vader are back with a pretty short thrash and death metal album that only goes for 29 minutes. It has nothing really special or unique to it, but it's simple and straight to the point. Next is the sophomore album of Chiesa, which in my opinion ends up being one of my favorite pop releases of this year, and I feel that it's pretty underrated. Sure, there are certainly some occasions where the album feels kind of dated because it goes into a more old school pop sound with like some throwbacks on like 80s and 2000s, but when it works, in my opinion, it makes for some really spectacular tracks and an album that is really memorable for what it achieves. Anti-Icon by Ghostemane is possibly one of the best things he has done as a full project. I've never really found something from Ghostemane that I feel that it's exciting from start to finish. Every single one of his releases are inconsistent, and this is pretty much also the case with Anti-Icon, but I feel that out of most of the stuff that he has put out, this one feels a bit more consistent, having some of the better ideas. Some of his directions on like the industrial rock stuff work better than ever before, so I do see a step up compared to most of the material Ghostemane has put out over the years. What was a really pleasant surprise of this year was for me enjoying a Lil Uzi Vert album as much as I did, but I feel that Eternal Atake is without a doubt the best thing I've heard from Lil Uzi Vert. There are legitimately songs that I've come back to multiple times, and I feel that this has never happened before in an album like this, but there are legitimately occasions over here where I truly enjoy the beats and the instrumentals. Sure, Lil Uzi Vert's delivery, once again, I don't feel that it's something special, but I feel that when it comes to the music and the aesthetic, it pulls off something really beautiful and quite special to the genre. With Song Machine Season 1 is where I see Gorillaz kind of going back to their roots, into their golden days. I still don't find this album to be as captivating as some of their first stuff, but I see some improvement compared to their previous two works at least. The features work somewhat better and the instrumentals give more of like the unique feel that you would get with the very first Gorillaz album, so I like this step up. Clowncore's Van is a pretty bizarre album, and I feel that from everything they've done so far, this is possibly their most cohesive and most well done work, with bizarre set of instrumentations and structures combining so many different genres together in a really short period of time, and also having some of the most outlandish video clips you can find in 2020. For me, even though it's possibly my least favorite Run the Jewels record, I still feel that this is a pretty significant work that deserves to at least be mentioned as an honorable mention. Now, I know that a lot of people are going to disagree with me because for a lot of people this is one of the most special and most significant albums of this year, and I can see that in some occasions. When it comes lyrically, I think that this album is really strong and the chemistry of the two rappers is spectacular. I just didn't feel as attached with the music and the instrumentals as with like previous albums, but I still feel that this is a pretty interesting rap album. Lady Gaga's Chromatica was inconsistent because on one hand I think that we get some of the greatest pop tracks that I've heard all year. It is an extraordinary combination of like old school 80s disco sound with a bit of a newer and futuristic twist. And out of the synthwave influenced pop albums, I feel that this is one of the most successful, but there were certainly tracks that dragged this thing down. I still think though that this is one of the better pop albums to come out this year. Mosaic 2 by Unrequited is a beautiful black metal album. It doesn't really do something that different to the genre. It's more of your typical stuff if you are familiar with like this new wave of atmospheric black metal, but I feel that some of the elements of production and some of the riffs were gorgeous. and I feel that this album was really nice. Burned Feathers is one half of Nicodarma, and if you are familiar with the sound of Nicodarma, you're pretty much getting more of the same. It is just brutal and relentless harsh noise. And for what it is a pretty decent work. Born in the Club of Gore make another beautiful dark jazz album. This release might not be one of the most spectacular things they've ever done, but I still feel that this is a release that deserves a mention. Princess Nokia made a two-part album this year, and the one that's worth shouting out is Everything Sucks, because it goes into her more trap sound that in my opinion it works really good for her. When it came to some of the tracks in 1992, her combination of like trap with some more old school hip hop was amazing. Her more R&B sound, I don't feel that it complements her all that much. So what she does with the direction of this album, with some of the songs sounding a bit more aggressive, slightly more dark, I think that it works really well, and it makes for some of the better material I've heard from Princess Nokia. It might not be close to what she did with 1992, which was an exceptional project, but I still feel that this is a really solid rap album. Pink Sifus Negro is in my opinion one of the most important political hip-hop albums to come out this year. Not only that, but the aggression of the music and the fusion of the multiple different sounds coming together makes for one of the most special and most exceptional hip-hop releases to come out in 2020. Even if the album has a bit of a filler to it, it's still an experience that you don't need to miss. Neurogeist by James Ferraro is in my opinion one of the most successful experimentations James Ferraro has done recently. Some of the ideas, some of the progressions and some of the structures over here feel really well placed, really well put together. There are certainly some shortcomings, but overall this was a really beautiful, complex, but also quite ethereal project. And the final honorable mention, the one album that was closest on being on my list with the top 50 albums of 2020, was the new album of Burzum. In my opinion, the one thing that hurt this release the most was how long it is and how there was multiple material that felt like filler, because the album feels more of like a compilation and a collection of multiple different tracks that he did in this dungeon synth and Nordic folk era, which in my opinion it makes for some spectacular stuff from Burzum. Actually it makes for some of my favorite Burzum stuff, but this one was slightly bloated. I still though find some of the tracks over here to be gorgeous, to be really beautiful, and managing to be effective even with their simplicity, which in my opinion is one of the strongest characteristics with Burzum's music. And so that's all of the 25 honorable mentions of 2020. What's your opinion in any of those albums? Do you feel that they're just honorable mentions? Do you feel that they should be higher or not even included there? Let me know down in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.